For those of you that don't know, Google just had a Google Games conference, like a virtual conference on YouTube, where they did a bunch of premiere videos. And the first couple of videos were very, very heavily focused on changes that Google is making to Google Stadia. Now, none of these changes really are going to have an immediate effect on the consumer, but they're definitely interesting changes. And I think some very big changes nonetheless. So that's what this video is about. If all that sounds good, go ahead and click on the buttons down below. Let everybody know that you enjoy this stuff, and let's get started. By far, the biggest change to Stadia that was announced today comes to Stadia Pro. For those of you that don't know, Stadia Pro is an optional subscription where if you don't want to buy it, you don't have to buy it, but you can subscribe in order to play games at 4K and get a bunch of games unlocked on your account rather than just buying games. If you don't want to use that subscription, you don't have to. You can just buy games and play them, but the option is there. And when I say that they're changing Stadia Pro, I'm sure that there's a lot of people who hear that and they say, oh no, I like Stadia Pro. Please don't change the way it is. It's not changing for you and it's not changing for me. It's changing for Google and it's changing for publishers. So how is it changing? Well, right now, the way that it works is, somebody subscribes to Stadia Pro, Google gets that money, which is, that's why Google got into this, is to make money. The change that they're making is that now Google is only going to take 30% of Stadia Pro subscription revenue. The other 70% of Stadia Pro subscription revenue is going to be divvied up amongst the publishers that are on Stadia, and it's all depending on how much your game is played. So if your game A is played way more than game B, well, then game A is going to get a bigger share of that 70%. This is a really, really big deal. And I also think, well, first off, this is a really big deal because it's going to bring publishers to Google Stadia. Publishers go where the money is. And we'll talk about where the money is in a second. But publishers go where the money is, and they can see this deal and they can say, all right, well, this is obviously a good deal for us. We can bring our game to Google Stadia, and we're going to make a bunch of money if people play our game. That's a great thing. Publishers are going to be bringing their games to Stadia because of that, and I think that that's fantastic. In addition to sharing the revenue from the subscription, Google is also going to make the rev share better for publishers. So currently, it's kind of standard practice that the store owner, in this case Google Stadia, takes 30% and the publishers take 70% of the money that comes in when I buy a game. Google is going to change that to an 85-15. So basically, Google is going to earn less money on the games, and the revenue is going to go towards those publishers instead. Now, if you are somebody who likes video games, then this is a very good thing. And the reason why it's a good thing is because if publishers are making money, then they're going to keep making games. And that's something that's very, very important. Games are very expensive to make. They take a long time to make. There's a huge barrier to entry to making a game. And being able to see a good return on your investment encourages publishers to continue to do that same thing again. So I think that this is a very good thing. There's a quick caveat here. They're only doing this for the first $3 million, and then it goes back to the 70-30 share. Now, whether or not that is equivalent to like what Epic Games is doing with the Epic Games Store or not, I don't really know. But I think that the 85-15 rev share model and the subscription 70% model, that is definitely going to entice publishers to bring their games to Stadia. Now, let's talk about Google for a second. Why would they do this? Because now they're going to earn less money. Google is going to earn less money on Stadia Pro subscriptions. Google is going to earn less money on the sales of games. Why would they do this? Well, there's a couple of ways to look at this. Maybe, number one, they can do this and still earn enough to make it profitable, or Google is doing this with a thought towards the future. And I think that the second one is probably more the case. I mean, with the chip shortage happening right now and it being super hard to put the, Stadia blades into places, I definitely can foresee how Google would probably be not making a profit on Google Stadia at this point. However, this is exactly what we've been saying here on this channel all along, is that Google understands that the gaming industry brings in way more money than film, TV, and music put together. The gaming industry is a huge wallet to reach into. And Google understands that if we lose money now, it's okay because we're going to make that money back later. So this is no different than Microsoft selling an Xbox Series X or Sony selling a PS5 at a loss, because I guarantee you they cost more than what they sell them for in order to manufacture these things. It's no different than those companies selling consoles at a loss, which has been something that we've seen for years. This is the same thing. This is Google saying, all right, we're going to take a loss at the beginning because we know that there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel where we're going to, and that light is going to be a big pile of money. That's why they're doing this. They're doing it for money. And they understand that there's money in the future if they lose money now. That's a really, really good thing. Everybody who's constantly saying things like, oh, Stadia is dead, Google's going to ditch it, they wouldn't be doing this if they did not plan to continue to keep Stadia going for a very, very long time, which is what we've been saying here on this channel all along, and what Google has been saying all along as well, that they are in this for the long haul. Anybody that looks at these moves today and says that it's a desperate attempt by Google in order to stay alive in the gaming industry, I think that they're being a bit myopic. I think that they're being short-sighted. And I think that they're wrong, because I think that Google is looking down the road and they're saying there's a big, big pile of money at the end of this road. And sure, there's a bunch of thorny branches between us and that pile of money, but we're going to do our best to get there. And I think that that's what's going to be happening. All right, that's it for the money. Let's talk about the other changes, which I think are also huge and going to bring lots and lots of publishers and developers to Google Stadia as a platform. All right, moving away from the money, let's talk about the actual process of onboarding a game onto Google Stadia. Google has said they spent a lot of time talking about how they're trying to make that process smoother by streamlining the certification process so it happens less times in the development of a game, to bringing your game over to Google Stadia and not having to worry about the fact that you made it on DirectX and Stadia expects Vulkan. Like somehow, and they didn't really go into detail on this, but somehow they're making it where you don't have to worry so much about the Vulkan port. I'm guessing that this is some kind of emulation layer happening on Stadia, which I wonder how much overhead that has and how much that will reduce the performance of your game. But if you're talking about an older game and you're porting it to Google Stadia, that performance really isn't going to be that big of a hit. And a lot of developers, as they develop new games, are developing with Vulkan in mind, so they won't have to worry about this. So I feel like this is a big deal for increasing the number of games coming to Google Stadia, although I don't know if it is a big deal in the terms of bringing brand new games to Google Stadia. Only time's really going to tell, and honestly, I don't even know if time will tell about this, because as the consumer, we're not going to know if a game is natively supporting Vulkan or if it was made with DirectX in mind and they're doing this weird cross-compatibility thing that Google came up with. And honestly, as long as the game runs, I really don't care. But this is, again, I've said this a million times on this channel. This is all about lowering the barrier to entry. And most of the time I'm talking about the consumer. Lowering the barrier to entry to the consumer means that I'm more likely to buy games. And when publishers know that, they're more likely to make games for this platform because there's low friction. But there's also friction on the other end of it, not just for me giving you money, but for you getting your game onto the platform. Lowering that, making that process a little more frictionless makes everything better. So not only are they lowering the barrier to entry for the publishers to make money on their game, to get a return on their investment, but they're also making it easier and lowering the costs of that investment to get their game onto Google Stadia. There was a bunch of other stuff that they talked about in this set of videos, and I'm not going to get into everything because otherwise this video would be super, super long, and I'm not going to do that. I talked about the most important things. Here are my final thoughts. My final thoughts are that this completely reinforces to me what I feel like we've known all along, but now I'm 100% certain of this. Google is building this plane in the air. And some people, this is what Google always does. They iterate slowly in public where everybody can see it. It's very different from other consoles in the past, because other consoles in the past, they build it, they're done with it, they release it, they start building the next one. Where Google is doing this slow, deliberative, iterative process while we're all playing it. And that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with because they expected it to be 100% cooked when it was done. And while it would have been nice had all of this stuff happened and been in place at launch for Google Stadia, well, then I would have missed out on a bunch of gaming that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to see. Because I played a whole bunch of games in these past year and a half, or however it's been, however long it's been since Stadia launched, that I probably would have missed out on. And I think that that's a really good thing. So the idea that they're building this plane in the air, I think is very interesting, very cool, and not all that surprising. I always suspected it, but these videos definitely cemented that for me. And finally, before I get out of here, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, in my opinion, you should not expect to see huge, drastic changes from this right away. That's something that I think you're just going to have to learn to get used to with Google Stadia, and that's that these changes happen slowly over time. And when Google makes an announcement like this, we're not going to see the effects of these announcements for probably a year or more. And because of that, people are going to forget how big the changes were because we don't see the change and the cause and then the effect right after. I think we're going to continue to see Google make these small changes that have big effects a long way down the road. And that's yet one more piece of evidence that shows me that Google is in this for the long run. All right, that's it for this video. I don't want to talk any more about it because I don't want the video to get too long. I've been accused of being long-winded. Leave a comment down below. Let me know, what is your thoughts? What is your thoughts? That's bad grammar. What are your thoughts on what Google announced today at their Google keynote? Thank you very much for watching. I will see you all on the next one. This is a cat.